Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root, from cardswire.com, the USA Today NFL wire site that covers your Arizona Cardinals. And joining me for the one show we're going to do this week, scheduling let it to be one day later, and so we're just going to do the one show. Seth Cox joins me, my co-host from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, SB Nation's Arizona Cardinals site. And we have a preseason game, Seth. We have a preseason game, and I guess in terms of fan stuff, training camp is over. No more fan practices. No more practices the fans can go to. They will have one practice left at State Farm Stadium on Thursday, and then it goes to normal practices. Preseason game on Saturday against the Kansas City Chiefs, and then they will move operations back to Tempe. They won't be staying at the Wigwam Resort anymore. They'll get to be at home and then drive to the practice. Oh, I didn't text you that. That's what that was. So yeah. Are you excited? Are you excited that there's actual football game this weekend? As excited as we can get for preseason games?
I think that's the best way to put it, Jess. I'm as excited as possible for a preseason game. I mean, there's a lot that we're going to be able to glean from it, and we'll talk, about some of the goings on of it and some, philosophical changes that we're seeing. But for the most part, I mean, it's still just what it is, right? And you can only glean so much information, even with potentially a new philosophy taking hold, at least this year, before really anything matters. And so that's kind of how I'm looking at it right now. I'm excited. We'll see what happens, but it is what it is kind of at this point, right?
Yeah. Well, in this edition of the show, we're going to talk about the starters playing. We're going to talk about the potential of Will Hernandez returning, and then talk a little bit what we want to see against the Chiefs in that preseason game. And I guess we can lead with this: is that the biggest thing that we have for this preseason opener is that the starters, including Kyler Murray, will see action on Saturday night against the Kansas City Chiefs, a team who does like to get their starters some playing time in the preseason. And I guess the question is how surprised are you at this? I don't know if we can call it change, but the idea that not only some of their starters, but all their starters, including Kyler, are going to get preseason reps in games.
I'm not surprised in the sense that I talked about the philosophy and what they're trying to accomplish, right? Like how we've seen this kind of grow into a more aggressive training camp, if you will. You and I discussed it last week, right? Like this is a training camp that we're seeing where they're hitting 4 times a week. There still are the low, what do they call it? Low energy or low low tempo days. But for the most part, I mean, they're hitting and they're going at each other and they're playing fast and physical. And that's what you want from these guys, right? Like you want these guys to be playing at a higher level coming into this year. And so, it makes sense in that terms that it's going to coincide leading into the start of the preseason, right? Like we can now see a little more and glean a little more information as we move forward into the season. But again, it's going to be minute, right? And that's why a lot of teams don't do it ever, because it is, maybe 2 drives, depending on how efficient you are, maybe you get a quarter. Inefficient you are, maybe you get a quarter. Like it's still not a 100% look. And so that's why there are still teams that don't have the philosophy of doing it.
Yeah, and it's interesting how things have changed, because if with the 4-game preseason, it was always a slow burn. So you might get 2 series in the preseason opener. You might get a quarter. Then the third preseason game was treated as your regular season dress rehearsal, essentially. And so you would have them play a full half and then maybe a series in the second half, so they can practice, so they can get the feel of halftime adjustments and things like that. And then the fourth preseason, nobody played. Like, it was just the guys mostly, like, who are going to be the very back of the roster, training camp, basically audition for the rest of the league. With a 3-game preseason, it's a little bit different. But like I was telling you off the air, is this idea that the Cardinals starters are going to play in this game really shouldn't be too much of a surprise, because of how their schedule lines up. The Cardinals and around the league, joint practices are the new thing. It's how teams are handling a 3-game preseason schedule. And for the Cardinals, that means they will only have joint practices when they're against the team that they're facing on the road, simply because it's August in Arizona, and State Farm Stadium isn't big enough to accommodate 2 full practices, because how joint practices run, you still have your individual team stuff that they're doing in different parts, and then they come get together for the joint part. And with the one field, that's not enough. You can do that if you have if on the outside you have 2 fields, you can do that, but literally nobody in the NFL is going to come to Arizona to do an outside joint practice in our weather. The Cardinals have, if you remember back when Bruce Arians would do one, and Steve Wilkes did one, just one outside practice. It was super early in the morning, and then the players were so worn out. Getting to my point, though, is that because the Cardinals joint practice comes in week 2, last week it was in week 3, and so their most starters, granted, like Kyler didn't play, James Conner didn't play, like their top starters didn't play at all, but they did get the competitive reps in the final week. And so you kind of built into that in that joint practice. But with the Cardinals joint practice being next week in their second game, they're going to get their competitive reps there and probably not play in the second preseason game. So essentially, the amount of work that they're getting is kind of the same. The starters will play some in the preseason opener. They will get the bulk of the competitive reps against the Broncos during the week in that one practice. Maybe if there's one joint practice, like instead of 2, because there's only one practice they're doing with the Broncos, maybe the starters will play a little bit in preseason week 2. Maybe I just thought of that because in the other years it's been 2 practices, but they might not play the starters next week because they got the competitive reps in the practice against the Broncos, and then the third preseason game, the starters aren't going to play anyway.
Right. And so we'll see how much we see them week 2, like you said, if at all, or if they look at a week of joint practices with the competitive, Denver Broncos team coming off the playoffs, basically in a similar position. Obviously finished up at 10-7, so a slightly better record, but in a similar position to Arizona in expectations. It'll be interesting to see how they go about that.
For sure. The one interesting thing, I think it's the first time since 2021 that Kyler plays in the preseason. There's a lot of talk about, how he needs to do that. And I am neither I don't think there's a wrong way to do it. Honestly, I don't think there's a wrong way to go about it. as long as your players are ready for the regular season. There were definitely reasons why you wouldn't do that. 2022, Kyler didn't play. Ultimately, he had the wrist issue, and he had COVID. So he probably would have, but the cliff was trying to get guys to the regular season. 2023 ACL tear. He wasn't eligible to play last off season. Gannon was just trying to get guys kind of ready. And honestly, they had a quarterback competition that they were trying to decide between Desmond Ridder and Clayton Tune. So they gave all the reps to them. I personally like when the starters play at least a little bit, because then at least you get a glimpse of what the team could look like. You get ones-on-ones, and especially like this week against the Chiefs, you get ones-on-ones for 2 series. And how do they look? How do they look in those 2 series?
Right, and that'll be the hope, right? Because knowing Kansas City plays most of their ones, we're not expecting. Do you think Chris Jones is going to play? I mean, I genuinely don't know, but
the one that we know won't play probably is Hollywood.
Yeah, right.
Because he's had his yearly lower body injury in training camp.
Right. And so we'll see. We'll see how they look and where they're at in this. But you got to remember too, there's always 2 sides to this coin, right? Like some seasons you come out and you're very vanilla and it doesn't look good and people get antsy, or some seasons, and I can't remember who it was. But it was a team that ended up not being very good, and they came out and they were like bringing the house all the time and like doing a bunch of exotic blitzes.
That was Kyler Murray's rookie year. The Raiders did that.
Yeah, that's right. And oh yeah, that's right. And then they talked all that, this Mickey Mouse football,
this college offense.
Yeah. So it was just like you're like, okay. So I mean, I think I'm of the belief that we see this team get out, get a couple reps, don't judge it too heavily in positive or negative. I mean, if Kyler hits a go ball to Marv early, I think you can be excited in that the timing is there, right? But like outside of that, again, if Spags is playing a really just basic vanilla defense and the Cardinals are able to move the ball a little bit or not, like there's nothing to be worried about. There's nothing to be like, oh my gosh, this offense is going to just tear down the league this year. Like there's good and bad of it, and vice versa, right? If you come out and you're really vanilla and Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs that go to the Super Bowl every year or are moving the ball, you don't go, oh, this team's going to suck. Like you just go, oh, they're not showing anything because it's preseason. So it's, that's my thing, is it's good to get the reps. Like you said, it's good just to get the timing to get started and get kind of back into game shape, right? Because that's the other thing people don't realize, and I know it's easy to say, but as somebody that's coached now for too long, one of the things that I like you find honestly is like as you get the prolonged into camp, the practices start getting consistently worse, because you're seeing the same defense, you're seeing the same offense, you're hitting the same guy. Like there's no, like the competitiveness goes out the window. And so when you're like, oh crap, now we get to hit somebody else, there is this, ramp up and then small peak, and then you start to like realize, oh, real football's coming in, and that kind of clicks over. So I think that's what the one thing that we might see that helps this year is that starts a little bit earlier, right? Like, oh, okay, we're into game mode, and that's something that we haven't seen, as you just kind of laid out, until the joint practice before the second preseason game. in prior years. So like I said, it's a week earlier where the practices probably ramp up because they're excited to hit somebody else, and then once that game goes on, it's like, oh, okay, now I'm starting to get into that game filtration mode and preparation and all of that, and that's important.
And with that, coming up next on the Rise Up Spirit podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk Web, we have some more camp takeaways, but more importantly, the potential of a returning player. That's coming up next on Rise Up Spirit. We're back on the Rise Up Spirit podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk on the web. Training camp is wrapping up, but we have what we've speculated about for some time, and that is a potential return for Will Hernandez, offensive lineman coming off an ACL tear. He announced he was medically cleared last week. We've talked about why the door might still be open, and that door is opening. He had a visit with the team on Monday. John Gambadoro, good old Gambo over at Arizona Sports 98.7, said both sides are interested in making a deal, and we should expect to see a deal done very soon. And that would, make a lot of sense. But what do you think this means? What do you think this means for the roster, for Isaiah Adams, and for Will Hernandez? Like, if he signs, is he going to jump back into the starting lineup?
Well, there's a couple things. I think first, the first thing is obviously the health, right? Like everything's got to be cleared on the Cardinals end as well. Hernandez and his doctor can clear them, but the Cardinals doctors need to clear. So I would assume that's, if there is any holdup, that's kind of what it is, right? Like, let's get the images back. Let's get all that back. Let's see where he's at. Here's the reality. Even with the off season, all that rehab stuff like that, there's a 0% chance that Will Hernandez is in football shape. One of my favorite players, but Will Hernandez, not a guy that you strive to have a physique similar to, right? So that is the one thing that when you look at it and you go, okay, how do we get him? And let's just put it this way. If you just say sign him prior to the first preseason game or after the first preseason game, how many weeks until physically he would be in shape and ready to where you'd want him on the field? We're talking at least 2 to 3, right? If not a month.
Oh, so, yeah. Well, 100% he wouldn't play in any preseason games because he will have had no ramp up.
Right. So to me, it's like you're bringing him back with the knowledge that he is not starting, barring injury to one of Evan Brown or Isaiah Adams. He's not going to start week 1, but he's a nice little, piece in your back pocket that you go, hey, all right, let's see how he looks. Okay. And then if Evan Brown or Isaiah Adams are struggling, prolonged struggles, or just aren't doing what the expectation was, you go, oh, this is, all right, we got this guy who we know what we're going to get, because unless he's just completely shot from a physical standpoint, you get at least slightly above average league guard play from Will Hernandez, dominant run blocker, pass blocks well enough, that, that's what you're going to get from him. So yeah, I think this is, it would be an excellent signing, but I think people have to be comfortable with what could be a, I don't want to say prolonged, but it could be a little bit of a time, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think signing Hernandez, especially if you're looking with an eye towards the regular season, it's a no downside move.
No, not at all.
It's a 0 downside move because then you have a guy on the bench. Now Howard Balzer, my guy over here at Cartswire, he suggested that he would probably sign and then immediately go on PUP. so that they can get him
in shape,
healthy, in shape, and then able to practice, and then maybe or even maybe start the season on PUP as well, where he had missed the first 4 games of the season, and you don't burn a roster spot. But even if you don't burn a roster spot for him, like, think of it this way: that gives you, they signed Royce Newman in the offseason. Royce Newman, his playing time since he was a full-time starter as a rookie, his playing time has gotten progressively less each year. So if you're looking at playing time, he's gotten worse as a player as his career has continued. But that's the type of guy that the Cardinals like to have on their bench. They don't want all youth. So you want someone with some experience in the league, being on rosters, started some games. And this, what you get instead is Will Hernandez, who now is in his 30s. You have a guy who has extensive starting experience, who was a high-end talent coming into the league. And, part of the reason why he wants to sign here is because he likes it. He likes the guys. He likes the coaching staff. He likes the vibes here. And so while part of him, and then there's always when he signed here to begin with 3 years ago, there was not a good feeling about him around the league because he was part of that awful New York Giants line. He was viewed as one of the problems on it. And so he signed a really cheap 1-year deal, then got a 2-year, not expensive deal, but nice deal. And now he's in this situation because he had the torn ACL. I have to wonder how much interest that teams had in him around the offseason. And so it gives him the opportunity to be on a roster.
Well,
he knows that there's the possibility he could play. And this, it gives us like having Kelvin Beachum. It's like having a second Kelvin Beachum quality player on the bench. But that does make rostering more difficult for players behind him. But yeah, you roll with Isaiah Adams. If he fails, you've got Will. If someone gets hurt, you've got Will. And if he shows like his body is doing better, you could phase him into the regular season, and even because the Cardinals have done this with at least with one position. And 2 years ago, it was left guard. Last year was right guard until the end of the season. They rotate. They will play 2 guys. So they'll have their starter, but they'll bring in another guy to play for a season or two. I mean, a series or two to kind of maximize that. And it's sort of evaluative as well.
Yeah. And there's a lot of value in having a guy that you can trust that may not be prepared right now, but is someone you can go to without kind of hesitation, right? As you alluded to. And we'll see how it all works out. I'm not super, he's a good teammate. He's a good, he's seems to be a good locker room presence, a veteran. And like you said, having guys like him and Beach, it's never a bad thing. Right. And so that's how you kind of go about it.
And aside from Will, the possibility of adding him, is there anything else of note as training camp wraps up? I think all the storylines have been exhausted. We've heard enough about Zay Jones. Not that I do believe Zay Jones will have a better year this year, but he's the guy that's getting that praise, that he's the buzz because he's been, he's the veteran. He's gotten really tight with Marvin Harrison Jr. The quote I think is fantastic that tells you kind of a couple of things is that Marv apparently told Zay that he's like, "Oh, you're going to be at my Hall of Fame speech." Oh, that's, for a guy as quiet and humble as Marvin Harrison Jr. is, to hear that he said something like that, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think that we've talked about it. The things that we're hearing from the people that are on the ground in the non-open parts of practice, it's really hard to to not get overly excited about, right? Like, especially with what Marv is doing, what Trey McBride is doing, just how fluid the offense looks. But again, none of it matters, right? None of it matters if you don't win. So we'll see how it works. We'll see what happens, and then go from there. But it is just it's at a different place than it was the last couple of years, and it's exciting to be back there and be to have some enthusiasm going into the season, as opposed to like the wait and see approach of like, oh, we'll see what happens.
I did want to ask you this, and this is about, because again, going back to off-season workouts, Trey Benson talked about having 2 RB1s. Like, he and James Conner were basically going to be co-starters. Apparently, there's been some 2-back looks in the offense in training camp, so that'll be interesting to see. James Conner sounding comfortable with a somewhat shared role. Trey Benson is expected to have a much larger role. How do you think that's going to look? Because obviously James Conner still, like he said 2 years ago, that 1,040 that he had, he wanted that to be the baseline. I mean, he beat that last year with 1,094. He had over 1,500 scrimmage yards. Trey Benson had 350 scrimmage yards. Between the two, they were at about 1,850 combined. Do you think the offense is going to be efficient enough to where the two of them could each be 1,000+ scrimmage guys?
Yeah, I do, and that's kind of what the goal is, right? I think early in the season we'll probably see a probably close to like a 60-40, if not even 70-30 split with obviously Conner on top. But as it goes, I would not be shocked to see going into a 60-40 to maybe a 50-50 split, because especially the running back position, we know how rough it is on players, and Conner's a guy in his career that hasn't been healthy,
has never played every game in the season,
right? And so you look at it from that perspective, and you say, hey, like, this could really work out, because it doesn't necessarily have to be a just an even split, like, James has 14 carries and Trey has 10, right? Like that, it doesn't need to be that way. It could be a game where James has 21 carries and Trey has 6 or 7, and the next game it's 15 and 15, and the next game Trey has 17 and James has 12, right? Like it can be like that, where we're talking about that 60-40 workload type of thing, and I think that's where we're going to get to eventually, because the other thing it will do is it'll probably prolong James's career an extra year or two, right?
Ideally, that would be the case. Whether that continues to be with the Cardinals or not. But I'm really interested, because, we look at, how much more can Trey Benson do? Everyone's looking at Marv. What's he going to do? Is Trey McBride going to put the same production? And what are they going to get for the other receivers? Is this offense, if it's humming, maybe there's all the yards for everyone, because they're going to be able to basically move down the field. And we'll have to say, like, their biggest issue has always been like the quick out. Like, they'll have a mistake or two and they go 3 and out. But like, if they can split that rushing attack between the two, and if Marv is an 1,100, 1,200 yard receiver, and Trey McBride is still a 900 to 1,000 yard receiver, and like we're starting to stack up numbers on numbers on numbers, and they're like, oh, how good could this offense be? And I saw, it's kind of crazy, because there was a video I saw. I don't know who it was. It might have been kind of a nobody. Who's like, is there anyone under more pressure on the Cardinals coaching staff than Drew Petzing? I'm like, why? The Cardinals offense wasn't bad. The Cardinals offense last year was good. There were inconsistencies, but we're talking about an above average unit, a top 12 unit that has been a top 10 unit in efficiency, has one of the best rushing attacks. Why in the world would Drew Petzing be on any hot seat at all? And now they've got all the continuity. They've got Marv looking incredibly good. Is it crazy to think that the rushing attack could be just as good and the passing attack be even better?
I mean, that's got to be
how many points are they going to score if that's the case?
Right, and that's got to be what the goal is, correct? Like the goal is that where they fell short improves enough and they maintain or even can grow even efficiency, right? Even the efficiency of the running attack, right? And so I'm, for me, that's where I'm looking at, and that's kind of how I'm looking at it overall is, the next step we see is the offense taking, the passing game, being as efficient as the rushing attack. And then we're seeing a lot of big things from both facets of the offensive game.
And then on top of that, a defense that might get the ball back to them. This might be a fun team to watch. Anything else of note that you have come away from training camp that you're like, oh, I'm concerned or I'm excited about? What?
No, I mean, I'm just excited about the season and see how this goes and see where this year takes us in general for the Arizona Cardinals and how they look and what they grow into.
With that, coming up next on the Rise Up Red podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk Web. What do we want to see against the Chiefs? It's a preseason game. Expectations high or low? What do we want to see? That's coming up next on Rise Up Red. We're back on the Rise Up podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk on the Web. The Cardinals take on the Kansas City Chiefs Saturday night, 5 p.m. Arizona time. You can watch that on CBS 5. And if you're listening to the radio, you get to hear A.Q. Shipley for the first time, albeit not with Dave Pasch, as Dave Pasch will be working the TV broadcast with Sam Acho, and it will be called Paul Calvisi with Shipley on the radio side. Not that I pay much attention to only the telecasts. I watch the game mostly. What do you want to see from the Cardinals in preseason on week 1?
The two big things for me are simply just efficiency on offense, and then realistically just a clean game. I mean, that's all. And by clean, I mean overall clean, whether it's health or whatever. There's not much that matters to me outside of just getting the competitive juices flowing in a more consistent and aggressive way.
Yeah, always, like, number one, may none of the guys that the Cardinals are counting on get hurt. There will 100% be injuries. Hopefully the injuries that are sustained are the day-to-day sort and not the many weeks sort. But yeah, it's really hard to judge the preseason simply because they don't game plan for each other. So it's not even like really a football game. They're installing certain things they want to do on offense and defense, and they're completely ignoring what the other team might do. It looks nothing like what a competitive NFL football game is. So while the outcome matters only in terms of you can evaluate the bench guys and their competitiveness and their want to and their grit in adversity, it's hard to evaluate when you aren't scheming your offense to beat certain defenses. You aren't dialing up particular defensive plays for certain looks on offense. You're just doing what you do, and you're testing players through. You've got particular rules and keys in certain situations. Well, this is the play we're running, but what do you do when you get this look.
Right.
And so
that's something
weird.
Well, and that's something I don't think people understand. Like, I saw the other day a lot of commentary about certain plays that were happening at training camp, right? And I'm like, again, this doesn't. I don't mean that this is 1,000% accurate, but I also know that this is 1,000% how things go during camp, and that there will be plays that we run specifically to see how a player handles it. And so I can give an example. The other day is, we were working on the timing of a route combination, and the cue for the quarterback was, hey, once you get to this step, the ball comes out. And they're like, well, coach, some of the receivers aren't making it there. Doesn't matter. The ball comes out. The ball comes out, and you show the receivers where the ball is going to be, and they need to understand, how do I get there in that timing? And that happens at every level, right? Like, hey, this is the read we want you to make, even if it's covered. Like, we want you to make this read. This is how we want this particular play to look right now, because we're trying something and we want to see if a guy can win in this way, or if he can run this route, or if he can, make this cut or make this read as a running back or as a linebacker, or as a DB. Like, can they do X, Y, or Z in this scenario? So like there are plays where you're just going to be out leveraged, or, in a bad position, but you're also not going to check because, okay, how do we respond, right? Like, how do we know we're not in the right spot, or we know we're in a bad look against this matchup, but how would we respond if this happens in a game? And, that to me, that's what preseason's about, and scrimmages and those things. And I get it, it's not fun to watch, right? It's not fun to watch an interception happen. It's not fun to watch a blown coverage happen, but it gives the coaches specifically information that they go, okay, we can do this. Oh, we cannot do this, right? Like, or one player specifically, or a set of players cannot do this. So where do we go from there?
And and what I also want to see, I want to see the starters be competitive against the Chief starters, whatever that looks like. Whether that's the defense looking good, the offense looking good, or at least playing even, just being boring. But then there's always the younger players. You want to see flashes from guys, and in the case, I don't think the Cardinals really have players like this, except for maybe like a Michael Carter, that when you have guys who are kind of out of place on the roster, experienced, talented players, like we talked about when Blaine Gabbert was, torched the Cardinals in that preseason a couple years ago. And when he was here, like he was playing in the second half against threes. You're like, those players should look like the best players on the field, because they are. And so you want to see some of that happening. But you also want to see the young players. You want to see some of the guys who are battling for roster spots show that. It would be nice, how do the younger defensive linemen look? LJ Collier, for example, is a guy that he's a back of the rotation guy. He's going to get runs with the 2s and the 3s, probably. Does he look good? Like, does he look dominant the way he as disruptive as he was late last year? Elijah Simmons, even though there's not, Josh Fry, they're undrafted guys and they're rookies. You want to see them do that. And then, like, in particular, players to what, like Elijah Jones. Elijah Jones needs to look something. He needs something, because it's going to be hard to keep him on the roster, because 3 cornerback spots are locked in with Williams and Will Johnson and Max Melton. And there's 2 spots left, we presume. And
right, exactly.
You've got Denzel Burke, you've got Elijah Jones, you've got Keitrell Clark. Keitrell Clark's gotten praise, so you feel like that he has a spot locked up. So who's going to get that? Is it this year's draft pick in Denzel Burke, or is it going to be last year's draft pick in Elijah Jones? So there's lots of little things that you want to see. I'm interested in seeing who else gets run on with the return game, and if we can see anything exciting in the kickoff returns, especially now that the touchbacks go out to 35. So we should see significantly more kicks returned.
Yeah, and how they go about that, and where they look to what are the schemes now, right? Like how are they going to combat the new kickoff rules? But I mean, are we gonna do you think we'll see a whole lot of that in preseason? I'm genuinely asking. Like, I don't know. Like, do you think teams will practice it in the preseason or hold it back so they can do some funky stuff when the games, quote unquote, count?
Well, if it's anything like the Hall of Fame game, I think especially, I thought that last year in the preseason, they also made it a point to try not to bang them out of the end zone because they wanted to see things. So I think we'll see kickoffs and kick returns, and we'll get to see whether Chad Ryland is varied enough in his kickoff skills to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see how he does with that.
Yes, that's a player to watch, because as good as he was last year, he was wildly inconsistent as a rookie. So can he keep it up? And
isn't that just such a? I mean, you and I have talked about this before, but isn't that
is the life of kickers,
right? And it's especially drafted kickers, right? Like we've seen that it's almost like when they get drafted, it's almost too much for them. Like, and I know people are saying it's just a kicker. What are you talking about? But like, like everybody knows when you're a drafted kicker. I know that sounds stupid, but like, Daniel Carlson's the one I remember like most recently off the top of my head, right? 3rd round pick by I think it was
Aguayo out of Florida.
But he never responded. And Carlson's a Pro Bowl kicker. Did he go from the Vikings to the Raiders or vice versa? It was one of those ways, but he's the one I remember where it was just like, oh man, this guy is,
I forget Sebastian Janikowski though.
Well, yeah, but he's the success, right? Like first round pick and just kicks forever with that, Will Hernandez body. So,
well, and I guess the most recent one is like I remember when we were doing the draft shows, Jake Moody was as money a kicker as you could find, and he has been so far from a money kicker for the 49ers.
Didn't they release him finally?
No, they released Greg Joseph, so I think Jake Moody won the job.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
they did bring Greg Joseph in, and they just released him this week. So it looks like Jake Moody won the job, but like he has been so wildly inconsistent in pros. Zane Gonzalez the same way. He was so great at Arizona State. He had a really good run with the Cardinals, but his career has been up and down and up and down. It's been crazy.
Right. And like you said, Moody was like the guy, like people were like, oh, this is what had been missing from the 49ers.
Nope.
So, yeah, I mean, it's just, it'll be interesting to see where those like small competitions that they have come into play.
Yep. And with that, we'll be back next week. We'll get to talk more about actually what happened. We'll get ready for the season. We'll talk roster battles and things like that. We might maybe roster moves, maybe injuries. But that wraps up episode 685 of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour Cardinals talk of the web. At Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. We'll be back again next week. Thanks for listening, as always.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red Sea Red, and of course, Rise Up, See Red.
Rise